Alright, so I'm in Genesis chapter 29. Where is it at? I think this book of Genesis done in the month of this month. I don't see why I couldn't get it done this month. It's the main focus.
Chapter 29. Jacob arrives at Gate Nabram. Then Jacob hurried on, finally arriving in the land of the east. He saw a well in the distance. 3 flocks of sheep and goats lay in an open field beside it, waiting to be watered. But a heavy stone covered the mouth of the well. It was the custom there to wait for all the flocks to arrive before removing the stone and watering the animals. Afterward, the stone would be placed back over the mouth of the well. Jacob went over to the shepherds and asked, "Where are you from, my friends?" "We are from Haran," they answered. "Do you know a man there named Laban, the grandson of Nahor?" he asked. "Yes, we do," they replied. "Is he doing well?" Jacob asked. "Yes, he's well," they answered. "Look, here comes his daughter Rachel with the flock now." Jacob said, "Look, it's still broad daylight, too early to round up the animals. Why don't you water the sheep and goats so they can get back out to pasture?" "We can't water the animals until all the flocks have arrived," they replied. "Then the shepherds move the stone from the mouth of the well, and we water all the sheep and goats." Jacob was still talking with them when Rachel arrived with her father's flock, for she was a shepherd. And because Rachel was his cousin, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and because the sheep and goats belonged to his uncle Laban, Jacob went over to the well and moved the stone from its mouth and watered his uncle's flock. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, and he wept aloud. He explained to Rachel that he was her cousin on her father's side, the son of her aunt Rebekah. So Rachel quickly ran and told her father Laban. As soon as Laban heard that his nephew Jacob had arrived, he ran out to meet him. He embraced and kissed him and brought him home. When Jacob had told him his story, Laban exclaimed, "You really are my own flesh and blood." Jacob marries Leah and Rachel. After Jacob had stayed with Laban for about a month, Laban said to him, "You shouldn't work for me without pay just because we are relatives. Tell me how much your wages should be." Now Laban had 2 daughters. The older daughter was named Leah, and the younger one was Rachel. There was no sparkle in Leah's eyes, but Rachel had a beautiful figure and a lovely face. Since Jacob was in love with Rachel, he told her father, "I'll work for you for 7 years if you'll give me Rachel, your younger daughter, as my wife." "Agreed," Laban replied. "I'd rather give her to you than to anyone else. Stay and work with me." So Jacob worked 7 years to pay for Rachel. But his love for her was so strong that it seemed to him but a few days. Finally, the time came for him to marry her. "I have fulfilled my agreement," Jacob said to Laban. "Now give me my wife so I can marry her." So Laban invited everyone in the neighborhood and prepared a wedding feast. But that night, when it was dark, Laban took Leah to Jacob, and he slept with her. Laban had given Leah a servant, Zilpah, to be her maid. But when Jacob woke up in the morning, it was Leah. "What have you done to me?" Jacob raged at Laban. "I worked 7 years for Rachel. Why have you tricked me?" "It's not our custom here to marry off a younger daughter ahead of the firstborn," Laban replied. "But wait until the bridal week is over. Then we'll give you Rachel too, provided you promise to work another 7 years for me." So Jacob agreed to work 7 more years. A week after Jacob had married Leah, Laban gave him Rachel too. Laban gave Rachel a servant, Bilhah, to be her maid. So Jacob slept with Rachel too, and he loved her much more than Leah. He then stayed and worked for Laban the additional 7 years. Jacob's many children. When the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he enabled her to have children, but Rachel could not conceive. So Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, "The Lord has noticed my misery, and now my husband will love me." She soon became pregnant again and gave birth to another son. She named him Simeon, for she said, The Lord heard that I was unloved and has given me another son. Then she became pregnant a third time and gave birth to another son. She named him Levi, for she said, surely this time my husband will feel affection for me, since I have given him 3 sons. Once again, Leah became pregnant and gave birth to another son. She named him Judah, for she said, now I will praise the Lord. And then she stopped having children.
So did Jacob see her, Leah, as unattractive or something? He didn't see her like as worthy or unattractive or even worthy. That's an interesting question about the story of Jacob, Leah, and Rachel in Genesis chapter 29. The Bible provides some details that shed light on this according to the biblical account. When Jacob meets Rachel for the first time, the text says he was in love with Rachel. Genesis 29 verse 18. However, when Jacob is tricked into marrying Leah first, the text states Leah's eyes were weak. Genesis chapter 29 verse 16. The phrase Leah's eyes were weak is interpreted by biblical scholars in ways it may suggest that Leah was not considered physically attractive, at least compared to her sister, Rachel. The implication is that Jacob was not intimately drawn to Leah based on her appearance. It could mean Leah had some kind of eye condition or visual impairment, which may have affected her appearance or made her seem less desirable. Some scholars believe it was more a common on Leah's emotional state, that her eyes reflected her sadness or lack of confidence, since she knew Jacob loved her sister. Regardless, the text makes it clear that Jacob's entire preference and love was for the beautiful Rachel, not Leah. It took time and divine intervention for Jacob to eventually come to love and appreciate Leah as well. This diamond requires an interesting study of human nature, beauty, and the complexes of romantic relationships, even in biblical times. It shows how external appearances can influence our perception and choices, so God may have a different plan in mind. Beauty should not be a primary factor in how we receive or value others. That's an important lesson we can learn from this biblical narrative. You're absolutely right that physical appearance should not be the determining factor in how we regard someone's worth or worthiness of love. The story shows that even the patriarchs like Jacob were sometimes overly influenced by the outward appearances. The deeper lesson here is that the true inner character, virtue, and one's relationship with God should be what matters most. As the saying goes, beauty is fleeting, but character lasts. Leah may not have been considered the most physically attractive, but she was evidently a woman of faith who loved God. In time, Jacob came to appreciate and love for her the person she was beyond her looks. Your insightful comment reminds us not to judge or value people solely based on superficial critical, like physical beauty. Rather, we should strive to see the true worth in each individual regardless of outward appearances. This is an important moral and spiritual principle that transcends the specific biblical narrative. It speaks to the timeless wisdom about the nature of genuine love, respect, and what truly matters in human relationships. Genesis chapter 29. We get to the notes in the Bible. Genesis chapter 29, verse 18-27. It was the custom of the day for a man to present a bride price, a substantial gift to the family of his future wife. This was to compensate the family for the loss of the girl. Jacob's bride price was not a material possession, for he had none to offer. Instead, he agreed to work 7 years for Laban, but there was another custom of the land that Laban did not tell Jacob. The older daughter had to be married first by giving Jacob Leah and not Rachel. Laban tricked him into promising another 7 years of hard work. In Genesis chapter 29, verse 20, verse 28, people often wonder if working a long time for something they desire is worth it. Jacob worked 7 years to marry Rachel. After being tricked, he agreed to work 7 more years for her. The most important goals and desires are worth working and waiting for. Movies and TV shows have created an illusion that people have to wait only about an hour to solve their problems or get what they want. Don't be trapped into thinking the same is true in real life. Patience is hardest when we need it the most, but is the key to achieving our goals. Genesis chapter 29, verse 23, verse 25. Jacob was enraged when he learned that Laban had tricked him. The deceiver now had been deceived himself. How natural it is for us to become upset at an injustice done to us while closing our eyes to the injustice we do to others. Sin has a way of coming back to haunt us. In Genesis chapter 29, verse 28, verse 30, although Jacob had been tricked by Laban, he kept his part of the bargain. There was more at stake than just Jacob's hurt. There was Rachel to think about, as well as God's plan for his life. When we are tricked by others, it is still wise to be faithful to our word. Nursing our wounds or plotting revenge makes us unable to see from God's perspective. In Genesis chapter 29, verse 32, today's parents usually give their children names that sound good or have a family connection. But the Old Testament portrays a more dynamic use of names. Parents often choose names that reflected the situation at that time of the birth. They sometimes hope their children would fulfill the meaning of the names given them later. The parents could look back and see if their grown children had lived up to their names. Sometimes a person's name was changed because his or her character and name did not match, and this happened to Jacob. He grasps the heel figuratively, he deceives. Whose name has changed to Israel, God fights. Jacob would no longer be seen as a deceiver, but as a man dependent on God, the God who would fight for him.